Mary had a little lamb.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
Hey!
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Today is Juneteenth. It's a day celebrated as the end of slavery in America, when federal troops entered Galveston, Texas, and General Gordon Granger announced to the population, all slaves are free. Now Congress is forming a committee to look at the idea of reparations. So let's look at that ourselves. Between 1619 and 1865, about 4 million people were brought to what became the United States in the transatlantic slave trade. They and their descendants fueled the nation's economy, especially in the South. Labor was free. When slavery was abolished after the Civil War, the newly freed people were originally promised 40 acres and a mule. But after President Lincoln's assassination, Andrew Johnson overturned the agreement, instead compensating the former slave holders. Reconstruction was ended prematurely in 1877, and through the 20th century, black people were denied voting rights through Jim Crow laws. Black veterans were denied full GI Bill benefits. Black homeowners were denied equal housing through redlining, and black Americans were terrorized by white supremacist groups. More than 4,400 people were lynched. In 2016, average median black American net worth was $17,409. Now, that means that half of all families had net worth, houses, whatever assets they've got that was higher than that. Half had net worth that was lower. Take a look at this. Median white American income, $171,000, 10 times the median of black families. This is according to the Federal Reserve. Between 1983 and 2017, black home ownership actually ticked down a little bit, 2 points. After years, as you can see, of very little variation, white home ownership has gone up fairly steadily. These are the things that this new reparations effort wants to address. H.R. 40, as the bill is known, calls to study the damage done by slavery and its legacy, and formulation of proposals for programs to increase economic, educational, and other opportunities for black Americans. This morning, Senator Cory Booker read off even more statistics on racial inequity today, and he and actor Danny Glover gave their assessments on the need for change.
It is a cancer on the soul of our country and hurts the whole body politic. This idea that it's just about writing a check from one American to another falls far short of the importance of this conversation and what I believe we will truly talk about.
All right. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. I think the GOP thinks Juneteenth is a Disney character. I swear to God. I don't think they understand. There is no similar hearing in the Senate. In the House today, there was a hearing. They held a hearing to discuss forming a commission. I'm not kidding. This whole bill that you may or may not have heard about, depending on where you get your news. H.R. 40 is just a discussion to form a commission to investigate the inequality that has always been part of American life. Always. Even in colonial times, before America was, under a constitution, okay? Even before the founding, before 1776. We're talking like 1619, okay? We're talking about 400 years of owning individuals who, by the way, did not immigrate to the United States. They were captured, kidnapped, and transferred here and then put into a life of absolute cruelty and bondage. And that went on for 400 years. It's only been over, the actual chattel slavery portion is only over 150 years. And in the last 100 years, we have had everything from lynchings to Jim Crow laws to the stealing of property, the doctoring of property records, the Ku Klux Klan showing up on people's lawns saying, hey, you may think this is your farm, but it's our farm now. We're taking it from you. And if you want to do anything about it, we'll kill you. You know, that kind of thing. And then that downshifted into Jim Crow laws, no ability to vote, segregated military in World War II. The African Americans, who we went over this on D-Day, how the African Americans had some of the toughest jobs, and they're segregated a role in the invasion of Normandy and Omaha Beach, right? That they had to bring these big balloons on chains filled with hydrogen and dig holes in the ground so that when the Germans fired at the beach, it would hit these balloons and they would explode, keeping our soldiers safe. Well, when they came home, they didn't get the GI Bill. When they came home, they didn't get low-income financing. They didn't get the low interest rates that were available to white service members like my dad, who eventually moved to these pre-planned communities like Levittown, Long Island, where Bill O'Reilly was, raised. You know, they didn't get any of those benefits. And then we decided that we would draft in the 70s, mostly 19-year-old black boys, to go fight a loser of an idea called the Vietnam War. And, they came home and nobody cared. And same with the white guys in Vietnam. Vietnam was just it was a tragedy. It was of epic proportions, the tragedy. But for the most part, most 19-year-old black boys, they were the first to go. And then, we decided when they came back, hey, what about a war on drugs, mass incarceration? It hasn't ended. And so all H.R. 40 was, all this hearing was today was to discuss and H.R. 40, just so you know, is really stinking old. Do you know how old that piece of legislation is? Oh, it's old. It's older than the crack in John Conyers. Yeah. That is a piece of legislation introduced by John Conyers, who's no longer in the House of Representatives, in 1989. That's how old this piece of legislation is. And the only thing this legislation asks is to please have a discussion in this country about what we all know is a built-in structural injustice that is leveled against people with more melanin in this country. Now, there's not going to be a similar hearing in the Senate. Oh, no. They've already done their work on reparations. They gave $1.5 trillion in reparations to billionaires and corporate titans, and they put it on our tab. We're all black now, whether you realize it or not. We're all black now. Yeah, the reparations they made to the corporate titans. They made to the richest people in this country. And why did they do reparations? Apparently it took too long, right? That's why. They didn't give it to them sooner. I don't know. Mitch McConnell does not believe in reparations for anybody except the very, very wealthy. Certainly not slavery. You get the feeling that Mitch McConnell doesn't think slavery was all that wrong. They asked him yesterday about reparations. He said, it's a 150-year-old story. I got to tell you. And we gave you Barack Obama. Oh, my God. He gave us Barack Obama. He said, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea. And then he said, we gave you Barack Obama. Now, I was not aware that Barack Obama was reparations. Were you? I thought Barack Obama was elected president by a majority of Americans, unlike Donald Trump. And it's just so sick the way that they still want to live in the 1850s.
Clear.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Yeah, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea. We've, tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. We've elected an African-American president. I think we're always a work in progress in this country, but no one currently alive was responsible for that.
Okay. So Mitch McConnell thinks that the Republicans are responsible for civil rights legislation and, the fact that we fought a civil war. I will say back in the 1850s, the GOP were the good guys. The Republicans were the good guys. So, yeah, times certainly have changed. And, at least he said original sin. That, he said it with a smirk, but that is probably as close as you'll ever get to, any kind of reparations from Mitch McConnell if you're not a billionaire or a corporate CEO, I don't think he realizes that the civil rights legislation that we applied and the Civil War that we fought against slavery were both fought tooth and nail and gunpowder and blood by Southern politicians exactly like him. I love the way these Republicans take credit for being the Republican Party of yesteryear. After civil rights, got to tell you, all the Dixiecrats, all the Southern Democrats became Republicans. Hence, you have this party of, Republicans that don't want to hear jack crap about wealth inequality in this country, or the history of this country, or the current history of this country with payday lending and, the amount of people who were sold, these liar loans that lost their houses in the last crash of 2008. It's just Southern senators like Mitch McConnell of Kentucky fought, and they're still trying to put some sort of a question on the census to try and increase the influence that white men have in the drawing of maps to choose representation. I mean, they're still doing it. I gotta say, we elected an African-American president, though. That was just like, oh yeah, there's your compensation, colored people. There you go. We made one of you president despite all the laws of God and nature against doing such a thing. I mean, That was just Van Newkirk from The Atlantic. He was asked to comment on that.
The thing that really gets me is that comment about President Obama. The fact that Senate Majority Leader McConnell seems to believe that Obama himself was reparations. That's a tough one to me. I think it was a big thing for African Americans, but 40 acres and a Barack Obama, I don't know that's how that works. But the whole thing, it was so long ago. That's not what reparations has ever been about. It's not about who or what person necessarily is responsible. It's the fact that the United States government built a government and an economy that sustained itself off the back of slavery and then Jim Crow.
Free labor.
Jim Crow, my grandmother was a grown woman with kids when she could vote legally for the first time. So, that's what we're talking about here. Not just something, so long ago, and we got Obama because of it.
Who Mitch McConnell said his entire goal was to make him a one-term president. Defeating Obama was Mitch McConnell's entire reason for getting out of his, his sleep number bed in the morning. I mean, honestly, this is so sick. And he deprived a sitting president of his Supreme Court nominee. I mean, literally deprived this country of a man that we had just elected. He was only there for 7 years, still had a whole year to go of being president of the United States. And Mitch McConnell just disrespected him to the point where he just said, no, I am not going to have a hearing in the Senate. I'm not going to listen to Merrick Garland. We're just going to hold that seat open for a white guy. I mean, that's just a fact. We have all this violence in this country perpetrated on people of color to this minute by white supremacists. Yesterday, there was a big report that said that 98% of all extremist violence in this country is committed by white supremacists. That's number one. Last night at the rally, the freaking white supremacists, the Proud Boys were there, and they were, what you didn't see from the rally last night were the protesters. Hell no. I mean, why should we see the protesters? And then, the protesters were gathered on the street. The Orlando police literally had to keep the white supremacists away from the Trump protesters.
Hey, wait! I was over there earlier.
There they
Joe
are.
told me I had to leave. Right?
Right.
Proud Boys are here, son.
Orlando, you didn't send your very best. When you send people to Orlando, they're not sending their very best. They're sending murderers and rapists and, violent criminals they're sending. Maybe we ought to round them all up. I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable. And all H.R. 40 says, all this 1989 piece of legislation says, is maybe we should talk about what causes inequality and the perception of danger and all the other things attached to being black in this country, to the point where parents have to have the conversation with their young black sons about the police. How many videos am I going to have to play you where a bystander is trying to save the life of a person who is unarmed, and the police have like all this firepower out? How many videos? I mean, how many times are we going to hear, "I can't breathe"? How many times are we going to see like, a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old with a toy gun, and the police pull up right alongside, bam, just boom. I mean, obviously there's a problem. H.R. 40 is just a conversation. That's all it asks for, is a commission to look at our society and figure out why, who, what, where, and when this inequality starts, and how to end it. That's it. And how many times are people going to, we need a conversation? Well, this would be the actual conversation. This would be a congressional conversation. This would be a legitimate conversation by people, and include people on the panel who have studied this issue for many, many, many years and understand what mass incarceration has done to an entire community of poor people. They're talking about, Manafort was supposed to go to Rikers Island, which is obviously one of the most horrendous prisons we have. It's in New York. It's right off of New York City. There's this one little road that goes to Rikers, and nobody else can go there. And it's dirty, and it's disgusting, and it's dangerous. And Manafort was supposed to go there. And they were going to provide him with, a special room so that he didn't have to be in the general population. And I just want you to know, most of the people in Rikers Island are just poor people who haven't been convicted of anything. They just can't afford to be out on bail while awaiting trial. And some of them have been there for 5 years, 4 years, 6 years. Innocent people.
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Mr. Coates, based on your monumental essay in the Atlantic magazine, The Case for Black Reparations, could you please describe briefly some of the continuing impacts and vestiges of the enslavement era on living African Americans today?
Well, sure. First, sorry, just cut on the mic. First of all, one of the things I tried to make clear in my testimony is that we perceive the era of enslavement, the era of Jim Crow, and in fact, I would actually even add the era of mass incarceration as separate things that are somehow not tied to each other. The greatest damage that enslavement did, besides the economic damage, besides the normalization of torture, of rape, besides the normalization of treating people as though they are things, is the institution in the American mind that black people are necessarily inferior. In 1865, when black people were emancipated, that belief did not magically dissipate. It proceeded for 100 years afterwards. It proceeded, as I said in my testimony, well into the lifetime of many panel members, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and then many of the people here in this audience. And so it's not a matter of the past. These things are linked. It's been said, I think, or alluded to repeatedly throughout this conversation that somehow wealthy African Americans are immune to these effects. But in addition to the wealth gap that's cited, one thing that folks should keep in mind is that quote-unquote wealthy African Americans are not the equivalent of quote-unquote wealthy white Americans in this country. The average African American family in this country making $100,000, decent money, actually lives in the same kind of neighborhood that the average white family making $35,000 a year lives in. That is totally tied to the legacy of enslavement and Jim Crow, and the input and the idea in the mind that white people and black people are somehow deserving of different things. If I injure you, the injury persists even after I actually commit the act. If I stab you, you may suffer complications long after that initial actual stabbing. If I shoot you, you may suffer complications long after that initial shooting. That's the case with African Americans. There are people well within the living memory of this country that are still suffering from the after effects of that.
Thank you very much. I yield.
So that's kind of how it went on the Democratic side of the aisle today with regard to H.R. 40, which is just it's a bill that would set up a commission to study the effects of slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, voter suppression, redlining, the stealing of land, white supremacists, just to have a little look-see and figure out why it is that when we live in a country where the unemployment rate is 3.9%, the African American unemployment rate is still 6.2%. Now, Donald Trump will scream and yell, oh, it's so good. The black unemployment rate is so good. It's so good. It's up. It's up, black unemployment. It went up from 5.9% a year ago. It is now at 6.2%. Did you see that? Yeah, I know. Just in case you heard the little what that was, we're under a tornado warning. Because there's no such thing as climate change. I'm in Florida. We're under a tornado warning. And the lights just went on and off is what that was. All right, so let me just play you a little mashup from this House hearing on whether or not to set up a commission to discuss reparations or even, what form they would take. I know a lot of people think reparations are like the government's going to hand a check to certain people in a group that have been identified as being X. No, that is not what reparations is talking about. Reparations is talking about structural changes that need to be made within our society. Things like payday lenders, okay, which, they were on their way out the door. And then Trump came in and he had Elizabeth Warren, when called upon by Barack Obama to look out for consumers, recommended and she was the architect of something called the Consumer Protection Bureau. And she didn't head it, okay, but because they would not confirm her. You understand the Republican Senate would not allow Elizabeth Warren, they would not confirm her to be the head of the Consumer Protection Bureau. So she, instead of whining or moaning or complaining, she decided, okay, then I'll run for the Senate because the Senate won't confirm me. I will become a senator. Elizabeth Warren is not a political animal. Elizabeth Warren is a law professor. Elizabeth Warren is a teacher at the very core of her being. And she is somebody who cares about consumers being protected from these multinational, international, whatever you want to call them, lenders that prey upon people with a bad credit score, right? I mean, it's so counterintuitive, right? If you can't afford to pay your bills to the point where, you're making a choice every month. Do I pay the rent, or do I pay the car payment, or do I buy food? Well, one of those is going to suffer. And once one of those suffers, your credit score is downgraded. So guess what happens? They charge you more to borrow money that you need to borrow, more than a billionaire needs to borrow money. I mean, it's just such a counter. So anyway, she decided she'd run for Senate, and that's how we ended up with Elizabeth Warren as a senator, right? So then Trump comes in and he appoints Mulvaney to do double duty, while Mulvaney, the coughing fiend, is going to be the chief of staff in the White House, and he's going to also run the Consumer Protection Agency, which he's just basically dissolved. So the payday lenders are still out there, and people are literally being charged 300% interest. I mean, there's more than the mob would charge. People who can least afford it are being charged just to get access to cashing their paycheck because they can't open a bank account. I mean, the whole situation, the whole system is broken, and everyone knows it. Do you know half of the United States lives in poverty? Half of the United States? If we had a conversation about structural changes that need to take place within this country to end the wealth inequality, the distribution of wealth to the top, to the top, to the top, over and over again, everyone's life would get better. Everyone's life would get better. And looking at how people are kept from credit, people are kept from, owning their own land, which they've owned. People are being intimidated. People are being attacked. People are being, sent to prison because they can't afford bail and they've not been adjudicated guilty and they're sitting there rotting. Everyone would be better off.
Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at memorable claims from 2015 that came back tonight.
Last quarter, it was just announced, our gross domestic product, a sign of strength, right? But not for us. It was below zero. Who ever heard of this? Our economy is the envy of the world. Perhaps the greatest economy we've had in the history of our country.
The GDP wasn't zero in 2015, and the economy isn't the best ever now. The president can certainly brag about the state of the economy, but he runs into trouble when he makes a play for the history books.
I will build a great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall.
Oh.
Mark my words.
All right.
And we are building the wall. We're going to have over 400 miles of wall built by the end of next year. It's moving rapidly.
Trump's wall is not being built.
There's fencing being built, and fences are not walls.
Reduce our $18 trillion in debt, because believe me, we're in a bubble.
Yeah, nothing there.
In 2015, President Trump made a big deal about lowering the national debt. It's gone up substantially since he took office.
Yes.
We have a stock market that is so bloated. Be careful of a bubble, because what you've seen in the past might be small potatoes compared to what happens. Today we had a massive day on the stock market. A lot of good things are happening, but we had a very big day, and we're very close to, I think, our 68th record.
President Trump said it was a bubble in 2015, but now he claims credit for the stock market gains. Really, it's going in the same direction. President Trump likes to imagine that everything changed when he took office. It didn't. Most trends continued in the same direction that they had during the Obama administration. And he hasn't accomplished many of the things that he claimed.
So last night was his big, announcement that he's going to run for president in 2020, which he already filed the paperwork for the day he was inaugurated in 2017. I just find that fascinating, but that's what he did last night. And so We fact-checked the president's speech last night. So did CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, PolitiFact, you name. There were no facts. There were absolutely no facts. I mean, he has turned this imaginary world into reality. I mean, last night, those rallies, it's like a giant support group for people who have chosen to live outside of reality. And let me tell you something. If it's like a support group, except if they gave, like AA-style chips for people who had gone various lengths of time without touching a drop of reality, no one in that crowd last night fell off the wagon. Everybody was imbibing this alternative universe that he has, created just for their minds only. I mean, it's just so unbelievable to me. This was off the hook. There was like no truth in anything that he sold those people, and those people were buying it hook, line, and sinker. And I'll tell you something. You know how I always tell you that he runs as a victim? Everything is like, they're coming after me, and you have to protect me. They're coming after my business. They're coming after my family. They're coming after my foundation. They're coming after my university. I mean, all of these things that people have looked at have turned up to be fraudulent or criminal enterprises. I mean, the Trump Foundation doesn't even exist anymore. It was liquidated by a court. Trump University doesn't exist anymore. It was liquidated by a court. He paid $25 million in damages to people that he charged $34,000 to attend Trump University, a university that taught you nothing and was proven to have taught you nothing in court and was a scam run by him. He slapped his name on this thing that he promised people were going to give them access to his acumen and even, give them some feeder deals, to start buying real estate. They were going to help them with their first deal. None of that was true. Everything about this man is fraudulent. Everything about him was, and last, he mentioned Hillary more often than any of the other current Democratic candidates. I mean, he yelled. It was so bizarre. I mean, it started with Eric Trump opened, and then Junior, opened, and then Melania and what was she wearing last night? I gotta say, we have commented on every first lady's, attire. The point where people were like, Michelle Obama was wearing J. Crew, right? And people were saying, who's she kidding? She still wears designer. But you're not allowed to say a word about Melania. She wore a neon yellow crew neck thing last night with a belt. Somebody needs to tell her she does not have a tiny waist. Stop belting thing. I didn't understand. And she said absolutely nothing, provided no inspiration. Just stood, my husband, the president of the, and Eric Trump said there were 100,000 people there. There were about 20,000 people there because that is the maximum capacity of the Amway Center, a place named for a pyramid scheme. It's a punchline in the movie The American President. Just like Trump last night. I thought people, good thing they're cheering for him because I thought they were about to buy some Amway products. I mean, it is a punchline. And that's where he was, at the Amway Center. And the capacity for the Amway Center is 20,000. Now, I will show, I could tell you that, there's this crazy right-wing lunatic fringy YouTube channel that I like to watch the Trump rallies on because you get all the bots in there and you could see, what's playing with these people, like what they're pushing out, the bots and the stuff. It's just a contaminated website, but it's fun, okay? And they now have expanded. I mean, people literally donate money to this right-wing lunatic website that allows for the bots to come into the chat room and to persuade people. It's so sad, and they'll block you. I mean, if I try and post, they just block me, So no reality at all. Well, this particular organization has expanded. And, you could see people donating $24.99 and $25. I mean, it's unbelievable. So now they have a spokesmodel. And she was emceeing their channel last night. It was really twisted. And they decided, because Trump always goes, see, the cameras won't show you how big this crowd is. So they decided that they would put more than one camera on the ground in the Trump rallies. And they're panning, and the whole upstairs, the whole, the loge and above is empty. There's no one there. So we'll say 20,000, which is capacity for the Amway freaking center, but it was not full. But Eric is saying there are 100,000 people here. And then Junior starts trashing Joe Biden about not curing cancer. And then Donald Trump starts in his speech about how he's curing cancer. Meanwhile, he's cut the National Institutes for Health cancer program by like $900 million. He's saying we're curing AIDS as if they had anything. And in his budget, they cut AIDS research by millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, this research on cancer, this research on AIDS, this has been going on since the 80s. Well, the early 90s, since Clinton. And the progress that's been made is legendary. I mean, it's epic. 70% of people who get diagnosed with cancer will make it now. It used to be a death sentence, right? I keep telling you, it's not what it used to be. But that's all due to the good work that our government has done on early detection and on oncotyping and genetic dissection of tumors and understanding, And he took credit last night for curing cancer. It was the sickest freaking thing. But Junior, This little snot nose is really, he's one for the books.
If government failed you, maybe you're the problem, Joe Biden.
What's with the voice? Oh, you know that this has to be a case of low T. Low T.
It's not rocket science. What was the good one last week? Remember, Joe Biden comes out, well, if you elect me president, I'm going to cure cancer. Wow. Why the hell didn't you do that over the last 50 years, Joe?
What? And then his daddy comes out and his daddy says he's curing cancer and that they have made amazing strides of wiping out AIDS. It almost doesn't exist anymore. I didn't understand. And there was nothing real on that stage last night. I mean, nothing real. But then he goes and he starts talking about Hillary again. He was like some 80s hair band, okay? Still milking, their 3-hit songs like, Survivor and playing Eye of the Tiger again. He's lock her up. I mean, his campaign manager had to be rescued from Rikers Island.
Mary had a little lamb. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
My father is the one person who did not need this job. In fact, his life is worse running for office than it would be if he wasn't in office.
He didn't need this job. If Trump does something good, it's swept under the rug. Someone else takes credit for it. They pretend it didn't happen.
The swamp is fighting back so viciously and violently. They went after my family, my business, my finances, my employees, but they are really going after you. That's what it's all about. It's not about us, it's about you.
Oh my God. So he sucks them all into this victimhood thing, right? And he's the one that's actually victimizing them. He's the one that's actually taking away their overtime pay. He's the one that's in court trying to take away protections for pre-existing conditions. He's the one that transferred, almost $2 trillion worth of wealth from the Treasury to the corporate donors, to the elites in this country. People in this country need 3 full-time jobs at minimum wage. These statistics, this is just unbelievable. There is a new study out, and it shows that somebody who earns minimum wage in the United States cannot afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment in any state, in any metropolitan area, or in any county in the United States of America. Somebody working 40 hours a week at minimum wage cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment. The minimum wage in this country has not changed in 10 long years. And yet the corporate tax rate has gone from 36% all the ways down to 21%. They got all the breaks. You got nothing. It's the 30th annual study of housing affordability done by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, okay? And somebody who is earning the federal minimum wage, $7.25, unchanged since 2009, has to work 3 full-time jobs or 127 hours of work per week to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment in any county in the United States. This is unbelievable to me. Wage inequality has worsened between black and white workers at all wage levels, exacerbating the racial housing inequities that have long plagued the nation. But that's why I keep saying we're all black now. It's everybody. It's every American that has to work for minimum wage needs 3 jobs, 3 full-time jobs in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. This is Ben Carson's own numbers, okay? Ben Carson over at Housing and Urban Development, idiot boy over there, right? Who thinks, that Oreos, real estate owned by the bank, Oreos, REOs. This is his Department of Housing and Urban Development's own data. These are their numbers. They say Americans who pay more than 30% of their income on rent or mortgage are considered cost burdened. And those who have to pay half of their compensation towards housing are severely cost burdened. Harvard University also did a study, and they have said that the number of cost-burdened families, not severely cost-burdened, but just cost-burdened families, have risen to 3.6 million more households. And despite the clear need for resources in the richest nation on the planet, 3 out of every 4 families under the Trump administration who are eligible for housing assistance are turned away. 71% of extreme low-income renters are severely house cost burdened, which forces them to cut back on other basic necessities like food, healthcare, transportation, and puts them at risk of housing instability, meaning they're just 5 seconds away from being homeless because they can't pay the rent. The studies all found that even if a minimum wage earner with a family were to squeeze his or her household into a 1-bedroom apartment, it would hardly be more affordable than the 2-bedroom. The worker would then need to work 103 hours per week to afford a 1-bedroom apartment without paying more than 30% of his or her paycheck. And yet you've got this administration, you've got Republicans in the Senate, you've got Republicans in the House. They refuse to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And still at $15 an hour, you would still have many people unable to afford a rental apartment in many parts of this country. The average you would need to earn to rent a modest 2-bedroom apartment in any county in the United States is $22.96 an hour. $18 an hour to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. They looked at some of the most affordable places in this country, the most affordable states in this country. Arkansas, who's about to get Sarah Sanders running for governor in 2022. Seriously. In Arkansas, a 2-bedroom apartment average rent is $742 a month. If somebody was working full-time, they would need to earn at least $14 an hour to afford it. The minimum wage in the state of Arkansas is $9.25. So somebody working full-time in Arkansas at $9.25 cannot afford the cheapest 2-bedroom apartment in freaking Arkansas. The national wage average in this country is $17.57, which is $5.39 below what you'd need to be able to afford a 2-bedroom rental. It's $1.08 lower than what you would need to rent a 1-bedroom. And yet Donald Trump doesn't see the need to discuss with his sycophantic audience raising the minimum wage. He doesn't see the need to talk to his audience about creating some sort of a trust fund so that the 71% of people who apply for and are eligible for housing assistance would get their housing assistance, therefore not homeless. Not on the brink of homelessness. Families that are completely and totally insecure and are choosing, and that's half of America. Half of America. And yet these people line up and they cheer all these lies and everything. He said, it's the best economy. He's so full of crap. There is so much economic betrayal in this tax plan and that's the only significant piece of legislation that has passed since he's become president. So obviously he's referring to the economy's doing great because of the tax cut. Well, the tax cut was a betrayal. It left almost everyone behind except for the very top. 80% of all the benefits went to the very, very top. And yet he's still preaching this populism and this economic nationalism, and his people are still cheering for it. And most of them are in this boat.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Republicans do not believe in socialism. We believe in freedom, and so do you.
Wait.
We will defend Medicare and Social Security for our great seniors. We will defend it like nobody else. And we will always protect patients with pre-existing conditions. Always. Always.
Except they're in court fighting a pre-existing condition. They're trying to strike down the whole ACA. They have no replacement plan, obviously. And the ACA is in court with the Trump Justice Department trying to declare the entire ACA unconstitutional, thereby depriving everybody with a pre-existing condition of being able to buy an insurance policy at any price. But the craziest thing, idiot Trump, it does not know that Medicare and Social Security are single-payer socialism. It doesn't know. In the same breath, we will fight socialism, but we will defend Medicare and Social Security. What? He's so stupid. And these people are just, they're bizarro world. They're cheering him. But there's some serious stuff in here. Some really, really serious stuff in here. Democrats want to destroy you. They hate you. They're going to get you. But the thing about him being in court to wipe out pre-existing while he's selling them on the ACA is just it's another world.
We will always protect patients with pre-existing conditions. Always. Always.
So then why is he pushing ahead in court to completely undo Obamacare without laying out any plan that would protect those with pre-existing conditions? If you wipe out Obamacare, those protections go away.
Well, I think that's a flawed argument to think that Obamacare is the only way to protect people with pre-existing conditions. The president has talked about in recent days that he plans to come out with a health care plan in the next month or two, is what he recently said, which will protect people, but it will also restore the fundamental principles of free market competition.
Okay, just to put a button on it with the facts here. If they prevail in court and wipe out Obamacare, pre-existing condition protection goes away right away. And we have heard no plan.
Just to keep you honest, we've heard no plan. He has been saying this forever. You remember when he was first running, he said, we're going to have insurance for everyone. Where's the plan? He's only in court trying to strike down the ACA. Healthcare costs are rising because the president actually, in the tax cut, did away with the individual mandate, which required people who we now have to insure who go without insurance. Showing up at the emergency room or showing up, at a hospital, in need of, open heart surgery, we have to pay their bills. So we tax them $600 a year, and that went into the pool, and therefore the cost of health care was spread out over all the people. So he did away with that in the tax plan, in the tax cut for the wealthy. And then he stopped the risk corridor payments, which also caused health insurance premiums to rise. Now, if he wins in court, there is no protection for anybody with a pre-existing condition. And that we go back to the old days where no matter how much money you're willing to spend on health insurance, you can't buy because no one will issue because you have to go be underwritten again. And they will say, no, you have a pre-existing condition. So we're not going to offer you insurance because you're a high risk for X. You've had it before. And you know what I mean? And this guy also called for work requirements for health insurance, for Medicaid, right? For the people who can least afford health insurance. He wants them to work before they get Medicaid. And that, of course, bars people who are disabled or students from receiving health insurance. If you strike away all of the ACA, which is what they're in court trying to do, then 26-year-olds can no longer stay on their parents' health care plan. He said he would lower drug prices. He has failed to deliver. Prices are through the roof. Through the roof. And just so you know, striking the individual mandate in the tax plan, which he did, caused our premiums to go up by about 10%, and it affected almost 8 million people. I mean, the guy is just and then he started going through the water and the coal and the okay. I have to say this was so worth a fact check. Okay,
I want to make clear to the media, we have among the cleanest and sharpest, crystal clean. You've heard me say it. I went crystal clean air and water anywhere on earth. We are creating a future of American energy independence, and yet our air and water are the cleanest they've ever been by far.
Okay, that's just absolutely patently 100% false. In the last 2 years, this nation had more polluted air days than we had just a few years before, okay? And today, the EPA just, the dirty coal, there was an Obama-era rule that was designed to limit emissions from electric power plants, coal-fired power plants. It was called the Clean Power Plan. It would have gradually phased out coal-burning power plants that emit these pollutants and heat-trapping gases that are responsible for climate change. Okay, now I will say air quality is a mix of things, but this man today is moving us in the absolute wrong direction. What we see over the last 2 years of his presidency is a flattening off of the progress that Obama was able to make. We are moving again in the wrong direction. And here are the numbers. The EPA quietly posted new air quality data online last month. and it shows a big uptick in polluted days. What does that mean? They look at different, places. So 532 American metro areas reported a total of 4,134 days in 2018 when the official air quality index passed 100, which means if it's over 100 in air quality warnings, it means that the air is hazardous for the elderly, for the very young. It's unhealthy for people with heart and lung disease, asthma, these kinds of things. There are 15% more bad air days per city than the average between 2013 and 2016. The worst of the bad air days jumped even more. In 2017 and 18, there were nearly 140 times when a city's air pollution reached the worst two categories, very unhealthy and hazardous. I got to tell you, Riverside, California, you top the nation with unhealthy, with the two air quality, the worst days. The worst days.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Greenhouse gases, they think about climate change, they think about weather-related events, things like that. Doctors, the public health community looks at it from a public health standpoint. You're talking about these particulates. Air pollution is essentially these small little particulates. You can't see them. They're about 1/30th the size of a hair, and they're out there in the air you breathe. And we know better now in terms of what that does to the body, the sort of impact that it can have on the body, particularly to people who have underlying illness, specifically heart and lung disease. They're the people who are going to most be adversely impacted by this. Non-fatal heart attacks as well, irregular heartbeats. These are the types of things that are of concern when you have more pollution. And let me just tell you the numbers here a little bit in terms of the numbers of people likely affected. 1,500 to 3,600 premature deaths annually. That would have, decreasing those deaths or preventing those deaths, that would have been a benefit of the Clean Power Plan. 90,000 asthma attacks, 1,700 heart attacks. You can read the numbers, but there is a direct health benefit to reducing air pollution. I almost can't believe I'm saying that, but there is, and people, I think, generally know it. These are some of the specifics that you should have in your back pocket as well.
What I say is what I say.
Right. So, when we had, a president named Barack Obama, we actually made all kinds of improvements into the air quality, all kinds of improvements, in clean water. And everything that has been accomplished is now being reversed by this president. Today, he decided that he would, allow for dirty coal-fired power plants to not, do anything to mitigate the particulates, to not mitigate any of the pollution that they spew into the sky. In El Paso, for instance, they had 200 bad air days a year in the 1980s. That dropped steadily to just 14 bad air days from 2010 to 2016, and now it's ticking up to about 20 20 a year for the past 2 years. You have 173 bad air days now in Riverside, California. I mean, and the water issue. Okay, again, he said crystal clear water, and we're expanding it. This is a lie too. Millions of people in this country. Millions. I know everybody's familiar with the lead in the water in Flint, but did you know that Pittsburgh also has a lead problem? Did you know that Milwaukee also has a lead problem? Did you know that Detroit also has lead? I mean, millions of people are exposed to unsafe drinking water every year in the United States. Millions of people. And you know what it would take to fix it? Yeah, infrastructure week. It would take an infrastructure investment. We would have to remove all the lead pipes in this country and replace them. You have these towns, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan. They have unsafe levels of lead in their water, which can lead to permanent brain damage in children. Then you have the chemical spills that release toxic substances into the main water supplies. I mean, everyone knows about Flint in 2014. It was lead from aging pipes that went into their water system, poisoning an entire community. That was not an isolated occurrence. Every single year from 1982 to 2015, between 9 and 45 million Americans get their drinking water from a source that violates the standards of the EPA. Rural areas, his biggest sycophants, are the most contaminated. The most contaminated. In 2017, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority issued a warning to residents to boil their tap water before drinking it, even if they were going to do basic things like brush their teeth or wash dishes with it. That went out after Pennsylvania's environmental regulators discovered low levels of chlorine in the water, which exposes the people that use the water to a parasite that causes cramps and, diarrhea and nausea. But they also have lead in their drinking water. And the state officials aren't doing enough. They're not even doing mandatory inspections. They just don't want people to know. In 2017, there was an audit in Pittsburgh that alerted the health officials that they were misleading residents into thinking the drinking water was safe, and it's not. Milwaukee, also, scandal, safe drinking water, scandal. 2018, Bevan Baker, the city's health commissioner, had to resign because he failed to warn families in Milwaukee whose children tested positive for elevated lead and told them install a water filter if you live in a home that was built prior to 1951. The mayor of Milwaukee, Tom Barrett, was asked to resign too in 2018. Same thing. And Flint is not alone. Detroit, 5-year-olds are showing up with brain damage. 57 out of 86 Detroit public schools. 57 out of 86 Detroit public schools tested positive for elevated levels of lead and copper. Again, children exposed to lead. There is no safe level of lead to ingest. And these kids are showing up with disabilities and increased violent behavior. And so the public schools in Detroit had to shut off the water fountains. And they replaced them with, water coolers, temporary water coolers. And now they're scrambling to install filtration systems. This man is a blight. Okay, this man is dangerous on every single level. And he stands there and lies to these people about every damn thing. He lies about the economy. He lies about his impact on the economy. He lies about when the stock market increased under Barack Obama by 56%. Under Donald Trump, it increased about 21%. But when Barack Obama was president, he said, this is a bubble. Everything's going to burst. You guys got to be very, very afraid. Be very, very afraid. Now that the stock market is up 21%. Oh, see, I did that. I mean, it makes no sense. People, half of us are poor. The other half are exposed to ridiculously filthy water. Newark also, their lead contaminated waters reached a crisis level. Lead contamination in the city of Newark, New Jersey was at an all-time high from 2018. July 2018 to December 2018, 100 of 240 samples from Newark's water system showed lead levels above the EPA's safety threshold. I mean, maybe this is the problem with Trump supporters. Maybe they've been drinking lead and they're brain damaged. I mean, I don't even know. Washington, D.C., they're contaminated too. Brady, Texas, you're contaminated too. With radium. Radium, that causes bone cancer.
It's the Randi Rhodes Rhodes Show. To speak with Randy, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
It's like a greatest hits, a K-Tel greatest hits collection, and they sound a little dated.
I got it.
These songs sound a little dated.
I mean, no disrespect to the king of rock and roll, but this is Elvis in '77. Yeah. Just kind of lumbering across the stage, sweating.
Yeah,
that was rough.
or in Graceland in front of like the 6 televisions with big, huge bottle of Quaaludes. And,
Okay.
All
right.
A bottle of vodka
You just took
and,
it too far.
Yeah, you were just a foil here.
We're
You don't want to
talking
bring
about
it into the gutter.
on-stage performances, but it is getting old. I mean, seriously.
It's Elvis.
It's Elvis
sweating.
Late
in 77, sweating, trying to sing the old hits, but his heart's just not really in it. Right? They know what he's going to sing before he sings it. They know all the words. And the guy who was once so exciting now is just dull. He's attacking Heidi. He's attacking.
Heidi's here.
Hillary
So is Eddie
Clinton.
Glad.
He's still attacking Hillary Clinton.
I swear to God, he's like an 80s hair band. Do you know what I mean? He's just out there doing his greatest hits. I love the Elvis comparison. That was just, that was worthy. That was unbelievable. That was so true. That's what he looks like. He looks like an old Elvis. The old Elvis, not the young Elvis. The old Elvis, where he's, out of his mind. Obviously, it's not Quaaludes, it's Adderall. Right? It's Adderall, and it might be straight to the vein at this point. Who knows? But he's sweaty, and he's orange, and he's fat, and he just, he's got crazy hair, and he's just doing his greatest hits about, the Democrats, they're and Hillary, and they did lock her up last night. I think and like I said, everybody went crazy trying to fact check this man. Stop. Let's just stop doing it. Let's just stop, because there's nothing he says that is true anymore. I mean, he was lying about 40% of the time. Now he's lying 90% of the time. The only true thing he said last night, the only true thing, he actually stood on the stage, and I'm not even going to play it. He said, "I think I can say whatever I want to." That was the only true thing he said. I'm beginning to believe that the people that show up for these things, I think they're lead poisoned. I really do. Because there is no other explanation for this cult-like. I mean, it's literally just pass out the Kool-Aid, la-ti-da and la-ti-do. I mean, it's like Heaven's Gate already, just put on your Pumas or whatever, and it just, go ahead and, go follow him into the wild blue yonder. It's very twisted. And something, most Americans get it. You know what at 67% now, 67% of America wants this man impeached. Well, I should say of Democrats, okay? It's not that, right. 67% of Democrats want this man impeached. And 67 members of the House, which is about a quarter of our Democratic caucus, are willing to impeach him. Or at least begin an inquiry. Nobody's saying you got to take the vote. No one's saying you got to take the vote. But what we are saying is start the freaking hearings. Start it now. I have to tell you that today, Hope Hicks was, I told you this last week, that she was due to testify behind closed doors. Junior's already gone back to the Senate and had to clean up his testimony because obviously he perjured himself on the Trump Tower meeting and his knowledge of Trump Tower Moscow. He said to the Senate behind closed doors under oath that he was only peripherally aware of a Trump Tower Moscow deal. And it turns out that he had been briefed by Michael Cohen at least 10 times, Ivanka too. So he had to go back and correct his testimony before they held him, for perjury. And Hope Hicks was due up on the House side today. And the president tried to claim some sort of twisted, reversible executive privilege. And you can't do that once she's testified to Bob Mueller and Bob Mueller's report has become public. Can't do it, okay? He's waived any executive privilege. And so Swalwell today and Cicilline from Rhode Island, they said it was just a waste of time. That the lawyers, the DOJ lawyers that accompanied her, Bill Barr sent lawyers with her, prevented her from answering any questions, including So where was your office? Objection. She can't answer where her office was? No.
I'll say this about Ms. Hicks. Almost every question I've observed, she is refusing, to answer, and that's a problem.
This is an ongoing effort, I think, by the President of the United States and the White House to prevent Congress from getting to the truth and getting the answers we deserve, and the President is continuing to engage in a cover-up.
So they're preventing her from talking about anything?
Anything related to her tenure in the White House. Absolutely. Even something as simple as, where is your office located? Objection. It's ridiculous.
Is the office question, is that a real question that was asked that they objected?
That was a real question that was asked.
Oh my God, that's Ted Lieu. Oh my God. Where was your office? The DOJ, Bill Barr sent attorneys with Hope Hicks, objected to even answering where was your office, which was asked probably to test if she was going to, have these lawyers object to every question. And apparently they did. Now, the reason why they wanted to talk to Hope Hicks, obviously, is because Donald Trump tried to cover up Junior's meeting at Trump Tower with Natalia Veselnitskaya, okay, and others who were acting at the behest of Vladimir Putin and offering preferential treatment to Donald Trump and the leaking of the stolen, hacked emails in exchange for removing sanctions on Russia, okay? And when it became public, I mean, after they, for almost a year, they no contacts with Russians. Nobody in my campaign knows her. We don't know anything about Russians. Nobody talked to her. Then all of a sudden, the Trump Tower meeting comes out, and they start shifting the story. Well, at that point, when they were first trying to cover it up, Senior was on Air Force One, coming back from Germany, and he dictated a letter to Hope Hicks that was a lie to cover up Donald Trump's meeting at Trump Tower. And that's why they won't let Hope Hicks answer any questions. And it isn't that Hope Hicks had anything to say about it. The DOJ lawyers, Bill Barr's henchmen, accompanied her and told Congress she would not answer any question today because obstruction works for this guy. And that's why 67% of Democrats want to see the impeachment inquiry begin. Nobody's saying take the vote so that, if you took the vote, then it would go over to the Senate and either Mitch McConnell would deny a trial or he would, ask for a vote right away before a trial, and he would, clear the president, and the president would have that to run on. And because these people are so stupid, they would think that he was cleared again, just like they think Bill Barr cleared him when Robert Mueller refused to. Robert Mueller passed the ball to Congress. It was an impeachment referral. That's what Mueller did. Referred it to Congress. And I'm not saying take the vote, but I am saying start the inquiry. Let's do it. Because this man is freaking dangerous to all living, breathing human things. Jerry in Baltimore.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, Jerry.
I am so surprised that you didn't play Jim Jones giving similar speeches to Trump down in Guyana from back in the day. That thing last night reminded me exactly of that.
Well, he's a cult, obviously. He is a cult, and the people that follow him are Cult 45. I mean, they are. They're just sycophants. They're just, the man could tell them that they should slit their wrists and take a blood oath to them, and they would all pull out their little knives and do it.
That was my next thing. He could tell them to commit suicide, and we'd have 35 million dead Americans the next day because the world's coming to an end. Trump is going to jail or, whatever. But I'm really surprised you didn't play any video of that. You missed out on that because a lot of people forgot. This younger generation don't know.
Well, Jim Jones, David Koresh, Jackie Spear, she's a current serving member in the Congress. She was part of the delegation that went down to Guyana. She was shot 5 times on the tarmac trying to rescue people from Guyana. I mean, and so, you know, you have a living, breathing congresswoman who actually was shot by these thugs down in Guyana. But I think people know what a cult is. I think that they, you know, I don't know how many people remember David Koresh, who talked everybody into letting them molest their children. But I'm telling you, if Trump said, give me the young ones, send me the young ones, I need to take them to a special island, and I'm going to train them to be, you know, great real estate guys or whatever, they would do it. They would surrender their kids. That's how deeply in denial these people are. They will believe anything he says.